Hello and welcome to Wisdom Bites. Hope you're well. Thank you once again for joining us. Very much appreciated. And in today's packed program, I'm going to be looking at not just one, but three main signals which are giving incredibly strong signals to determine the final phase of the Bitcoin bull run. You really don't want to miss this. And one of them is the chart that's never been wrong, and it's just flashed one of those signals, which is the start of the end of the bull market. I'll also be going through the wider markets as well as looking at the news in the background of what's happening, and also doing the 60-day cycle to determine exactly where the market may well be heading in the coming days and weeks. So if that sounds interesting, then you know what to do. Get yourself a cup of tea, sit yourself down, eyes on the screen, and let's get cracking. But before I begin, the usual polite reminder, please remember everything in my videos is just for educational purposes, so please always do your wider research before you make any investment decisions or any swing trade decisions. Okay, so I'm going to go straight into the main theme of this video, and that is the Bitcoin chart that's never been wrong and flashing the signal for the start of the end of the bull market. Okay, I'm going to start off on the first cycle from the inception of Bitcoin back in 2010 to the end of the first 4-year cycle in November 2013. And I'm going to start off on the daily chart, whereas the actual signal is on the weekly chart, and you'll understand that a little bit later. So on this daily chart, we've got the 4 simple moving averages. That's the 20, the 50, the 100 and the 200. And the 20 is the yellow line, the 50 is the white line, the 100 is the red line, and the 200 is the green line. And the first thing to notice here is that we had in the first cycle, we had 3 peaks, the third peak being the final peak of the 4-year cycle. But before you had the first peak, the second peak and the third peak, look closely at exactly what these simple moving averages did. So after this price action here, at the beginning, where all the lines were a little bit entangled, once they'd untangled themselves, and when they lined up in exactly the chronological order with the 20, the 50, the 100 and the 200, and that was after this cross here of the yellow over the white, i.e. the 20 over the 50, as soon as that happened, this was the signal for the parabolic phase of the final phase of the first peak here. Then we had a mini bear market, and once again, in the consolidation phase, all the lines of the simple moving averages started to tangle themselves up one more time. But as soon as they started themselves to untangle here, you can see quite clearly the yellow line, the 20, crossed over the white line here, and you got a perfect chronological order, 20, 50, 100 and 200. As soon as that happened, that was the start of the final phase of that peak there. And finally, on the third peak, which ended the 4-year cycle, exactly the same thing happened. The yellow line went above the white line there, the red line got above the green line there, and that was the start there. Can you see after this consolidation, that was the signal for the last phase of the 4-year cycle, which we can call the parabolic phase. So this was giving us a clue as to what may happen in the second cycle. And now I'm going to switch over to the weekly time frame to show you exactly what happened cycle by cycle. This was the daily time frame which feeds into the weekly time frame. Now you'll see why I had to show you those simple moving averages on the daily time frame rather than the weekly time frame, because the 200 simple moving average only started over here after the end of the first 4-year cycle. So you can see quite clearly that on the weekly time frame, when these lines lined up in a chronological order, the 20, the 50 and the 100, and the 200 wasn't available here, of course, we can see quite clearly as soon as that happened, at this point, this was the beginning of the final phase of this peak, but also continued for the final peak, the end of the 4-year cycle here. And if we move on to the second cycle, exactly the same things happen as we've seen with Bitcoin time and time again. The same things rhyme, the same things repeat, and the same things give us the same signals. So at the end of the bull market in the first 4-year cycle here, we had the bear market. All these lines, as you can see, started to entangle themselves in this consolidation phase at the end of the bear market and at the beginning of the bull market. But once they had lined themselves up in the right order, 20, 50, 100, 200, and that happened here where the 50 crossed over the 100. So that gave us the 20, 50, 100 and 200. And look, this is exactly the point where we had the final phase of the bull market, which ended in December 2017. And if we move on to the third cycle here, this was the December 2017 bear market consolidation here. All the lines getting themselves entangled one more time, and you can see quite clearly, as happened before, the 20 passes above the 50 here. So you get the 20, 50, 100, 200 lining up one more time at this point, and this is precisely the beginning of the end of that bull market, or the first top of that bull market. And the second top happened exactly in the same manner, where the 20, 50, 100 and 200 were still intact, and we ended up with the top of the bull market there at 69,000. So far, this signal has given us 100% accuracy and line up in the chronological order. That is when the fireworks will start for the start of the end of the bull market. And here we are in the current 4-year cycle. We topped out here at 69, had a bear market. All the lines, as you can see, got themselves entangled one more time. And these lines have been trying to untangle themselves all the way from back here, when the yellow line, the 20, the faster moving simple average, where the 20 first crossed over the 50 simple moving average, then crossed over the 200, and then crossed over here above the 100. But this is what we've been waiting for over here. This is where the final piece of the jigsaw puzzle for the start of the end of the bull market, where the 100 has now finally crossed over the 200 simple moving average. So now you've got the perfect storm of the simple moving averages, where you've got the 20, the 50, the 100, and now the 200, all lining up and giving us an incredibly powerful signal which triggers off the final phase of the bull market. And if the previous 3 cycles are to go by, then we may well be now at the start here, where we've just bottomed out at 52,000. This may well be the start of the parabolic move that we've been waiting for. Let me have your views in the comments below. I'm going to move on now to the second signal, which is going to come tonight when the market closes for the end of the month. So today is the 30th of September, and we're waiting for the monthly candle close tonight. And I'm going to show you something incredibly interesting, exciting, and another trigger which is giving us the same signal as this over here with the simple moving averages. And the second signal, which I'm going to show you, which are incredibly powerful and have the power to move heaven and earth in one direction, and that is these 2 candles here. The name of this 2-pattern candlestick pattern is called the Tweezer bottom, and this signal here is the same signal but in reverse that we had over here with these 2 candles. So what are these candles, I hear you ask? Very good question, and I'm going to give you the answer, because it's part and parcel of what normally happens in every single cycle of the last 15 years with Bitcoin. So the name of this 2-candle candlestick pattern is called the Tweezer bottom, and this is a bullish reversal pattern that appears at the bottom of a downtrend. Both candles are of the same length, but the first candle in this formation is bearish, i.e. this one here. And that's because if you're on a downtrend, you're going to end up with a candle like this. And then you get this green candle next to it. And as you can see, the second candle is bullish. And this normally starts the trend to the upside. And the other one, of course, is the Tweezer top, which we got in March this year. And that was this one here. So you got the uptrend with the green candle here, followed by the red candle. So you got the Tweezer top, and now we've got the Tweezer bottom. And as you can see quite clearly from the 74,000, this formation, the end of this candle here was at 60,672, and it brought the downtrend all the way down to 49,000 here. And what we're really waiting for is that this candle can close here very similar to the top of that candle, which is going to be at around about 64,628. So anywhere around that close tonight at the end of the monthly candle, if we close at 60,628, we have a classic Tweezer bottom candlestick pattern, which is a reversal pattern to the upside. Okay, if we have a look at the wider news, exactly what's going on, what's in the news, and we can see that there's a lot of bullishness with what may happen in October, and we already have a name for October, and that is Uptober. Feeling and the sentiment is now going towards a new all-time high in October. Whether we get it or not, only time will tell. And if we have a look at the Bitcoin liquidation heat map to give us some sort of a range between the ranges that Bitcoin may well be trading over the coming days. You have a strong yellow line here at 63.5 and exactly 65,000 here. So this is the range where it's actually got itself caught up in at the moment. And if we have a look at the Bitcoin ETF overview and the asset inflows and outflows of these ETFs, and we've been seeing a bullish picture emerging over the last couple of weeks. And as I showed you last week, we were getting more of these greens down here rather than these reds. And this time there's even fewer reds here. And if we look at the BlackRock ETF, we're getting large numbers now returning to the inflows side rather than the outflows. And the grayscale bleeding is now calming down to much lower levels. And most of that is being picked up by the grayscale Bitcoin mini trust with the lower fees. And that's attracting most of the Bitcoins that the grayscale is actually losing. But as you can see with the other green numbers, we're getting healthy numbers coming in with the inflows. Okay, moving on to the dollar and the wider markets, we've got some very interesting moves going on here. So if we look on the monthly chart with the DXY, the dollar, obviously we've been falling all the way from the end of 2022, and we've had a few counter trend rallies, but the direction of travel is still to the downside. And we're now coming to the bottom of this candle here. So we're probably going to find support at around about the 99 level here. And this is where we may well get another counter trend rally like this before we move in the normal direction where it's been since the end of 2022. So we are making the lower highs here and the lower lows. So this is where we're really expecting the direction of travel for the dollar, which will allow the wider markets, including Bitcoin, to flourish. Okay, moving on to the SPX, and what we can see is something very bullish developing here. And we've been looking at the SPX through the eyes of the 60-day cycles, and we bottomed out here on day 73 on the 5th of August. And since then, we've come back up here and made a double top. This is where most people thought we're going to actually come back and start the bear market for those people who had thought that we'd topped out here. But what we can see is we found strong support at these levels at around about the 5,400, which is where our line was, and then we bounced off there, created a triple top, and this was into the mid-cycle of the current 60-day cycle here. And this is where we would expect the midpoint pullback, and this is exactly what we got, but it was only for a couple of days. And then we've actually gone above the double top level here, and with all probability now, we'll probably make this previous resistance as a support before we bounce higher into the 60-day cycle end at around about the end of October. So this is where we're at. This looks very bullish. Unless something catastrophic happens out there with the geopolitical situations developing, we really don't know what's going to happen. There are events which are beyond our control, but in the absence of these black swan type events, we should, in all probability, move higher and go around about the 6,000 level mark here. And if we move on to the gold, what we can see is a very powerful move that we've been witnessing here. And on this monthly time frame, we can see quite clearly that we're making higher highs here and the higher lows here. So the direction of travel is incredibly to the upside with a very strong trajectory. So obviously we broke out from this very strong trend line here. This was the real start back in March 2024. This is where we broke the trend line, and ever since then, we did have a consolidation period for around about 4 months here. And then last month, we broke out, and now we're actually making more higher highs and more progression. So all looking incredibly bullish with the gold chart. Okay, moving on to the silver. So if we look on the monthly time frame, we can see quite clearly we are breaking above this very strong resistance point. We came here the first time back in May this year, then we got a big pullback all the way down to 26 from the 32 level. But today will be the final day of this monthly candle, so as long as we close above, that'll be our first close since May, and that'll be a higher high one more time. So once again, this is giving a very bullish picture of where it wants to go. And I know through the comments, many of you are silver and gold traders and find the overall picture analysis very useful for both gold and silver. Okay, moving on to the 60-day cycle. Very interesting developments here. As I mentioned in last week's video, we have the midpoint of the current cycle, which started here on the 6th of September. And currently today, we're on day 24. So we're coming into the mid-cycle pullback. and it looks like we're getting an early mid-cycle pullback. But along the way, as you can see quite clearly, we're making the higher lows at the bottom here. So the chances are we're probably going to get support at around about the 62.3 level here at this point. So we'll probably have a little bit more to go, and that could happen over the next few days. Then any time in the midpoint area here, wherever it takes us, we should see a big bounce back to the upside. And of course, we'd already broken the previous high here, so we have created a new higher high. And sometimes as it happens, when you break a new high, you get a lot of profit takers, but then the probability is for us to retake that high one more time. So we'll see what happens, and it is obviously a game of probabilities. Never take anybody who guarantees that the price is going to go up or down. Nobody can guarantee anything. There is no certainties, there are only probabilities and possibilities. So in all probability now, we're going to be coming back down to this level here at the bottom of these candles, which is going to be about 62,300. But should we break that, then there's obviously this very strong level here, and we have found it resistance-wise very strong here, there as well. And as we came up, we found resistance there as well. So these are the 2 points to look at, 62.5, 62.3, and 61.62. And I would expect with a higher probability to bounce from this level here. And this is really where the interesting bit will be. If we make a very strong move in the early part of the second phase of the 60-day cycle here, if we make a very strong move here, then we may well have a big break above to the upside and take everybody by surprise. This is what Bitcoin often does, to take everybody by surprise when everybody will be thinking at this point that we're going to be subdued and even coming back down here. But then the price just turns on us and makes very big moves to the upside. But in the absence of that, what would be very bullish as well would be that if we can get up to these levels between 70 and 73, and consolidate in a bull flag so that the next cycle, which starts in the second week of November here, then that would be a very good catalyst for a break to the upside above the previous all-time high of 73,800. Okay, we got a lot of new members in the private member section where we cover the Bitcoin miners. And one of the main things that the new members noticed was that if you look at the Bitcoin price, since Bitcoin bottomed out at 52,000 here, if you take the measure from the bottom of there, 52,000, to the current price, we're still up around about 20% from those 52,000 lows. And in the same period, if you look at Marathon to represent the Bitcoin miners, and some have gone up a bit more than this. So from the bottom there to Friday's close was about 31%. And in pre-market at the moment, it usually has a bigger effect to the downside. But even after a 5% fall in the pre-market, it's still doing better than Bitcoin at 25%. So what we're expecting with the Bitcoin miners is that whenever Bitcoin is coming down, as we saw with Bitcoin coming down 30% since it topped out at 73,800, whereas most of these miners, when they topped out, if you look at over here for Marathon, this one topped out at $34, and it came down by 61%, so double the amount. And if we zoom out on the weekly time frame, we can see that when Bitcoin bottomed out at 15,400 at the end of the bear market in 2022, we can see Bitcoin to its peak went up by 384%, whereas the Bitcoin miners on the whole went up 3 times greater than Bitcoin at nearly 10 times here. And many of them went over 13 and 14 times. So this is where the leverage play comes in for the Bitcoin miners. And as we've seen just now, as Bitcoin's recovered from 52 and gone up by 20%, the miners are beginning to outperform Bitcoin one more time. And you'll see this time and time again. Whenever Bitcoin has a rally, these Bitcoin miners, their rallies are much greater. Like the first rally here was up by 200%. The second rally here was 148%. The third rally here was 336%. And the last rally here was about 92%. And you can see quite clearly that we are on this trend line very, very strongly here. And this is where we've got rejected time and time again. So the next move, as long as we believe there is a bull market, and we have another 6-12 months to go, then the probability is that from where we are currently, we're going to be making inroads into the top of that trend line. And if you measure that from today's price here that would be around about a 300% move. And we're not really expecting a 300% move for Bitcoin from where it is. Of course, that would be welcome, but if Bitcoin makes a 3x move, then the Bitcoin miners are going to break this. Then the Bitcoin miners are going to break this trend line and go much, much higher than that. So if that's something of interest to you, please remember the Bitcoin miners, as I've just shown you, are much, much more volatile. On the way down, they come down by a greater amount. If you can't handle that, then the Bitcoin miners is definitely not for you. So stick to what you've already got and where your comfort zone is. But if you want a bit of dynamism and you want that potential move to the upside with greater gains and a leverage play, then the Bitcoin miners may well be for you. We do 2 videos here every week on a Wednesday and a Friday. We do a market update every single day, Monday to Friday, at the end of each trading session. And the whole point of that is to keep everybody on board, on the same page as we're going along, and keep everybody updated with articles and charts and everything else that is relevant and important for the Bitcoin miners. So if that's interesting to you, so if you're okay with the volatility and you want the potential for bigger gains, then all you have to do is click the join button here, or in the description box, you can click the red button here. And for the price of 1 coffee per week, you have access to 2 videos and market updates every day and the potential of a leverage play with the Bitcoin miners over Bitcoin. Okay, we'll leave it there. I hope you found value in the video. If you did, then please do remember to like and to subscribe if you haven't already done so. If you've got any comments, leave them in the comments below. Until the next time, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.